Innovación en 360, una mirada integral. Martin Reeves, Managing Director and Senior Partner en Boston Consulting Group. Modera, Claudia Boeri, Directora de IDEA y Presidente Región Sur de SAP Latinoamérica.
Good morning, Martin. A pleasure to have you here with all our colleagues here in Argentina.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Claudia.
Well, and today we are going to discuss innovation. And what better to have this first conversation with you, Martin? Why innovation is so important nowadays?
Well, 4 reasons, really. One, competitive advantage doesn't last very long. So if you look at the excess returns that leaders get, about 20 years ago, that used to last for 10 years. So if you were a leader, you'd probably be a leader for 10 years. Now that number is 1 year. So what does that mean? That means the companies need to reinvent themselves to avoid disappearing. The second one is that we know that the potential for creating new growth declines with size, and the largest companies are now absolutely enormous. They need to defy the gravity of size. The third one is that we know that because of demographics, long-term growth rates are trending down. And then fourthly, we of course have some extremely difficult challenges like global warming and inequality that we need to tackle, because that's the foundation of business. So for all of these reasons, innovation is not an optional extra, it's a core activity.
Well, and in this context where the competitive advantage fades over time, why is the role of imagination in today's business environment so important? And how do you connect imagination with innovation?
Yes, well, if you want to make a change in the world, you first have to make a change in the mind, and that is imagination. So this diagram behind me is the Copernican system, the heliocentric system, with the sun at the center rather than the earth at the center. And just this little shift in the mind, the way that we look at things, of course, completely revolutionized the way that we look at the world. So ideas and imagination are really important. The second reason why imagination is particularly important right now is that many of the routine tasks of management will be taken over by machine learning. And therefore we need to refocus human cognition on more uniquely human traits. And one of them, of course, is so-called counterfactual thinking, imagination, the ability to imagine things which don't exist, but they could exist. Now, those things, of course, have no data associated with them, so machine learning cannot imagine, but humans can.
Yeah, and that's what makes the difference, right? We can apply our imagination so that we create the new world that we all together are about to live. And Martin, what is the role of the organizations about imagination? I believe that you may have some examples that you can share with us, probably about topics that organizations have to consider so that we can foster imagination with our people.
Right. So there's a paradox, which is we all have the capacity for imagination, but we know that the corporate, the organizational capacity for imagination declines with age and complexity and size. So we believe, and this is the core theme of my book, that imagination can be systematically harnessed. And it really involves getting 6 things right. The first one is what we call the seduction, which is noticing things that don't fit, noticing anomalies and accidents in the world, because they are the reasons for us to imagine. Something doesn't fit the pattern. The second one is the ability to manipulate ideas, to evolve mental models. This is something that we probably haven't been trained in since kindergarten, but it's a very important capability. The third one is when we collide an idea with reality. And this is not just a matter of testing the idea, this is a matter of creating new surprises to further trigger the imagination. The fourth idea is very important, which is the ability for ideas to spread. The way that many corporations are structured is they're almost designed to prevent ideas from spreading with separate P&Ls and separate departments and divisions and so on. And so we need to work hard to make sure ideas spread, because an idea that doesn't spread is just a private fantasy. And then the fifth one, is we need to be able to codify ideas, because we need to replicate the success of an idea, maybe the other side of the planet, in a situation that we haven't experienced before with a person that wasn't involved in the original innovation process. So this is all about codification. It's about recapturing the essence of what it takes to apply the idea. And then the last one, which is the most valuable and but also one of the hardest, is what we call the encore, which is to do it not once, because success is actually not rare, but repeated success is actually quite rare. So companies need to be competitive at executing yesterday's ideas, but they also need to be competitive at creating tomorrow's ideas, and they need to do that again and again. So these are the 6 ingredients of corporate imagination, if you will.
Yeah, and do you have examples? Can you share with us examples of companies, of organizations that have applied these 6 steps that have become successful through following this methodology that you are sharing?
Well, in a sense, all great companies are founded on an active imagination. If you go back to the very beginning of a company, usually there's an entrepreneur which is proposing something which may seem ridiculous or impractical at the time and may be not supported by others, a different way of doing things, a new product that people don't know that they need yet, and they persist and they create this. So at the origin of all of our companies, we have entrepreneurialism and imagination. The problem is that there is nothing more toxic than success. With success and complacency, we begin to think that our mental models are facts, but our mental models are not facts. They are just a way of looking at the world, and we need to learn to institutionalize constantly refreshing how we look at the world. But I mean, a good example of a company that is a repeat innovator is, for instance, Amazon. If you think about it, they were in books, and then they were in all products, and they were in third-party sales, and then they were in cloud businesses, and now they're in retail, and they've just moved into pharmacy. So this is not a trivial thing to be repeatedly successful.
Yeah, excellent. And so we have to put our imagination into work so that we can really challenge our organizations and, recreate success over time. So what is the role of the leaders in this full work that we must do? What are the measures that we as leaders and, the audience that is here with us are leaders of different companies in Argentina? So what can we do so that we rekindle imagination?
Well, leaders are absolutely critical to imagination. If you think about it, a fearful organization will never try anything new. And also a complacent and arrogant organization will never try anything new because they don't see any need. So leaders set the tone. And some of the things that we found when we spoke to CEOs of imaginative companies were, one of them is embracing a crisis or even creating a crisis. Saying, let's go to our least satisfied customers and let's really look at what's going wrong for them and let's embrace that possibility. So sometimes leaders can embrace crises, or they can actually create crises, create a sense of urgency. Another one is laying out an ideal. So if your company, if your employees just think that you're in the business of making widgets, then they won't see the bigger picture. But if they think that your company is in the business of solving nutrition problems or creating happiness for people or whatever, if they see the bigger ideal, they will stretch their imaginations. And a third one is to celebrate entrepreneurial heroes. So who does your company celebrate? Does it celebrate people with big P&Ls and large organizations, which is yesterday's success, or does it celebrate the people that are creating new things? So for instance, the Recruit company, a Japanese company, very successful innovator, has what it calls its entrepreneurial heroes. And these are the most important people in the company, the most celebrated and recognized people in the company. Another one is, it sounds a little strange, but unrealistic goals. If you set a moderate goal, then you will probably not have to change your mental model to achieve that goal. But if you want to double your distribution coverage or triple your distribution coverage, an unreasonable goal, you have no idea how you're going to do it, it will force you to break your mental model and reconsider your business. So this was another move that we saw, which was very common.
Yeah, so in a certain way is to go beyond the boundaries that each of us and the organization has, right?
Yes, go beyond what you currently consider to be possible. And just always remember that a mental model is not a fact. So you say, I'm in the banking industry and we provide mortgages. In a sense, people treat these things as facts, but it's a way of looking at the world. We can look at the world in many ways. We could say we're in the information business. We could say we're in the emotion business. We could say that we supply products to facilitate lives. We could look at it in 100 different ways, but often we're locked in by our mental models. And I've been doing business strategy for 30 years. One of the things that I noticed is that if you take the smartest people, you give them the best questions, you give them the right resources, you give them plenty of time, more often than not, they will create a strategy which is pretty much a variant on yesterday's strategy. Why? It's because they are locked in by their mental models. They're not self-aware that their mental models are not facts.
Yeah, and that's why we usually have read and know that kids are better, leveraging their imaginations because they are not concerned about what really exists. Really?
Absolutely. So, we measure the performance of companies, but I like to measure the vitality of companies, the potential for future growth. And just because you're high performing does not mean that you have a high potential for future growth. A high potential for future growth, vitality, is actually youthfulness. So in a sense, we need our middle-aged companies to shape up and become more youthful, to learn from the imagination of children. And one of the central ideas in my book actually is play, because biologically speaking, what is play? Play is accelerated, de-risked learning. That's the biological function of play. Does your company play? In the book, there are 16 games which senior executives can play or employees can play to stretch their imaginations.
I love that. Let's play a lot. I am curious about the image that you have. What's that? Why did you choose that image?
Well, what do you think it is, Claudia? Take a look. What does it look like?
Wow, you are trying to make me imagine many things. It is definitely a box with something within it, but I cannot tell.
Okay, so it is a Japanese wooden bathing bucket, one that you use in the bath, with some aluminium electrodes in the bottom. And it was the first product of the Sony Corporation. And it was a rice cooker, an electric rice cooker. And the reason they made a rice cooker was that during the Second World War, rice was very rare in Japan. So rice was a sort of luxury. So they thought that after the war, there would be a boom in people eating the things that they couldn't eat during the war. So they built a rice cooker. It didn't work. It was a total failure. So they looked around and they saw that somebody had just invented the transistor. So instead they built a transistor radio, and this became the beginning of their path to consumer electronics. So I think the point here is that, and by the way, this image is from something online that we call the Napkin Gallery, which is an accompaniment to the book. So inventors often draw their first inventions on a table napkin, and we have an exhibition of these napkins, and this is one of them. And if you look at this, you can see that it's messy, it's incomprehensible, it doesn't work, it was heavily opposed at the time, it looks impractical. But these are the humble origins of ideas which change the world. And if we look at this and then if we ask ourselves, How many napkins does my company have today? What are the messy ideas that we might be neglecting? Then we are able to recapture that humbleness and that entrepreneurial spirit that we need if we want to be not only high performing, but if we want to continue to be high performing.
Yeah, so you are sharing another good conclusion here, that it is sometimes good to make mistakes as long as we can progress and we can learn from that. Many of the new things in the world have come from mistakes in the past, right?
Absolutely. One of the most fascinating interviews I did was with General Martin Dempsey, the head of the entire US Armed Forces. And I asked him what his managerial philosophy was. And he said that the problem that he had when he took over the job was that the elite in the US military had never made any mistakes. And so what he did was he increased the failure rate on the elite educational courses. And people thought that he was crazy. They said, why are you failing our best people? And he said, because I'm not interested in people that never tried or never made a mistake. I'm interested in people who fell on their face and then got up again. I'm interested in resilient people, people who can reinvent themselves. So he's looking for resilience in leadership, not success, because success often comes from not making any mistakes.
Yeah, so thank you so much. But before we close, Martin, I would like to leave our audience with a couple of tips, personal tips. What fosters your imagination? How you become imaginative every day?
Well, let me give you two things. My guess is that a lot of the people in the audience, maybe you and me, we work too hard. We think that if we work hard, things will be okay. But Bill Gates had a very interesting saying, which is that busy is the new stupid. If you're so busy that you don't think, is that such a smart idea? And so the first one is time for reflection. So in my calendar, I block blocks of time called reflection time. Why? Because I need to think things over. I need to think about what comes next. I need to think about why am I doing what I'm doing. Without reflection, it's just execution. And execution is great, but you never get anything new by merely executing. And then the second one is get into the world. So we know for a fact that large corporations are very introverted. They spend most of their time looking inside the company. Who got promoted? What's the plan? What's the latest sales number? What does the R&D department say? It's all internal stuff. You're never going to get surprised and inspired unless you're looking out of the window. So get out into the world and look for anomalies. And I'll give you a good example. Nitin Paranjpe, the COO of Unilever, he turned around a Unilever subsidiary by sending everybody, including the receptionists and everybody in the company, out into the field to ask 5 questions. And one of the questions was, what surprises you? And this is a key question. Go get surprised by looking at things in the real world, and then you'll get inspired. And providing you have time for reflection, you will think of new possibilities. So time for reflection and get out into the world.
Okay, Martin, thank you so much for sharing this morning with us. And I'm pretty sure that many of the people together today will apply these tips. I will, incorporate the napkin for my future reflections. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Claudia. It was good fun. Thank you.